sharing an ice cream gives joy both to the person who receives it, of course, and also to finding a friend who would look forward to seeing you next time. In the next few minutes, we would enjoy this process together of sharing and learning our experiences on trying to improve the process of quality in follow-up of high-risk newborns, what we fondly call as our Blue Book. I would like to take you with me through the journey of the formation of this Blue Book that has helped us in trying to follow babies better. So I would carry forward throughout my presentation this theme picture of sharing, and therefore the whole presentation would just be a string of small stories, real life stories that I will share with you. In this way, we will together go through the process improvement that has happened over the last 20 years in following up babies of NICU in trying to improve their health and developmental outcomes. The first experience or story goes back to the year 2003. My teacher, Dr. Ashok Kumar from Pediatrics, invited me to join the Department of Neonatology at KIMS Health, Trivandrum. Young postgraduate from PGI, I was very enthusiastic and wanted to implement screening of congenital hypothyroidism in the hospital. It was not easy. People felt it was too much money spent from the pocket of a family for a rare condition. The program took off, and a few months after, a family came to meet my teacher. They had suspected that child had developmental delay. This 3-month-old baby's father was a neurologist in the Sri Chitra Institute of Medical Sciences. My teacher, Dr. Ashok Kumar, mentioned that you anyway had a thyroid screen done in the newborn period. Can you please tell me the report? When they checked the report, our lab had flagged that the sample was insufficient and a retest was required. This information had not been conveyed to the family. Now this neurologist's father was very angry and he threatened to take us to court if the screening report happens to be abnormal. We had not closed the loop. We had done this scientific process of screening babies for congenital hypothyroidism with good intention. We had the best lab. We took blood tests before the baby went home, but we did not keep the baby and the family in mind and did not ensure that the report has to be conveyed to the family. We were lucky that the repeat test was normal. We escaped the situation, but the first learning experience that we had, that any process that is implemented as a screening tool, as a quality process to help a baby or a family is complete only if it reaches the beneficiary. We also learned very soon that we may not be as lucky at all times. A 24 weeks baby was managed the same year in the unit at a very stormy intensive care. The baby would crash every time we would try to extubate the baby from the ventilator. By 4 months of age, after 5 cardiac arrests and resuscitation, the baby was ready for discharge to home. Before discharge, our ophthalmologist looked at the eye, initially said that there are cataracts, but we realized that they were advanced stage of ROP. The baby's ROP screening was missed somewhere en route, and the baby had stage 5 irreparable retinal detachment and was going to be blind forever. There was immediate panic. We were sure that ROP screening was done, but documentation was not very clear. We used to use paper records and files those days. We were flipping back through the files to find out when the screening was done. Did the ophthalmologist clearly mention when he wants to see again? Did we fail to call back the ophthalmologist? Or the ophthalmologist did not indicate that a review would be required? The blaming game started, and we told that possibly the ophthalmologist did not indicate the need for review, and the ophthalmologist wanted, obviously, to shift the responsibility to me. We all were worried, but all we knew that this "don't look at me" had no meaning because the baby could not look or see forever. So we learned that if we did not have a process in place which is very clear, where to record, how to indicate, how would you get an alert again that a follow-up is required, and when would we review? And we know from the medico-legal history of Indian cases that this is probably one of the reasons why ROP litigation is one of the highest number of cases in the court following birth asphyxia. The problem is not in the lack of an ROP expert or the lack of knowledge that ROP screening need to be done. There has to be a process in place which keeps the baby in mind, sets a reminder, closes the loop on whether this process was done or not. It's from here I would recap the question that parents often ask us. They say, we have a preterm baby in the NICU. Doctor, we are willing to spend any kind of money. We will stay with you as long as you suggest. Can you guarantee that the baby would be okay? We want only a normal baby. When younger, I used to get very upset and even scold a few families saying that this is not a television or a mobile phone, that we can replace it if it does not work well. So do not ask for a word guarantee. But through the journey of my own life, I realized how disturbed I get if I get a wrong product delivered by a online shopping, or if my mobile phone, which is brand new, fails to work within 2 weeks of my journey. I wanted a guarantee that they would be good. Isn't it that the baby of a family is the most precious product, much more than any of the product purchased online or the phone? So we may have to think of some kind of a guarantee. I started promising my families and myself that we cannot fix all your problems, but we promise that we won't fail in doing what we should be doing correctly. We promise you to do the steps and the processes correctly throughout the journey. With this aim of trying to guarantee the right processes within the domains of science, we then tried to improve every time we learned how to get the process of implementation correct. Basically, we are intensivists, and in 2004, we were proud to pick up a 20-day-old baby with newborn Kawasaki disease. This was the second baby in the unit. The first one we couldn't save. The second baby we saved and sent home after giving 3 doses of immunoglobulins. Family was very happy, they were thankful, and we were on the journey to consider publishing this case. Before we could finish, the child was 1 year old, and the orthopedician called me asking, can we take this baby up for a hip surgery? Because he has a congenital dislocation of hip that was possibly not picked up in the newborn period. We realized that we had great focus on the heart, but we had forgotten a basic of examination of hips, and there is no reason why a baby with dislocation of hip cannot develop Kawasaki disease. Performing an ortholinase test, very simple test, in the newborn baby could have saved the baby. We soon wanted to have in place a protocol, a list of things on doing what surely can change the life of the baby or infant. And we started preparing a to-do list before we discharge the baby and in the OPD to be under the glass top table. And soon I already had 3 conditions to tick off at every visit. I wanted to check if congenital hypothyroidism screening was done and the report was good. ROP screening was done and the next visit scheduled and closed, and a hip examination was done. These 3 I started doing ritually. The process of learning continues. We had a 27 weeks baby discharged from the NICU, which those days in 2005 was a thing to be proud of. And this baby grew up to become 12 months old, a corrected gestation of 9 months. He was not having a good development. Other than language development, listening and responding, the child would not smile at anybody. The child would not be able to walk or hold and push a chair and move around. The child would not reach out for objects. We did not know what was going on with the child's development. We thought it was a periventricular euthymalacia. Because of a standard protocol that we had borrowed from other centers, we had sent the baby for a refraction test, which we have to do between 9 to 12 months as our protocol those days. Today, RBSK recommends between 6 to 9 months. The preterm baby had a myopia of -10, and that is the reason why he could not see and smile at somebody. He could not reach out to objects. Specs were applied. The child grabbed the specs and never allowed to remove them because he could now see what he was not able to see for the last few months. And within a month, the child started smiling, reaching out for objects, and even walking independently. So each of these processes need not be by reinventing the wheel yourself or by your own experience and making mistakes. Some of them we can borrow from standard practice protocols and implement even before we understand how its value may be. These days, refraction can be done by an even easier method than retinoscopy, which requires an infant cooperation. This is called an auto-refractory device. It just has to have the baby looking at you for 10 seconds, and it will give you the refraction squint in no time. This is an even more interesting experience. One of my friends had come to be a short-time observer with us. And this doctor was watching an ROP screening happening, and she was reading the notes. She read that the baby had an eye examination even the previous week. So she asked me, "Sir, why babies are undergoing fundus examination every week? When I get back to my hospital, will I have to arrange an ophthalmologist so often?" There was a mother in the background who was listening to the story. She immediately responded and said, "Dr. M, the ophthalmologist is looking whether the blood vessels have grown from the last visit in a normal pattern or an abnormal pattern." Dr. M almost fainted and fell down. She wondered how the mother knew so much. And this happened because a few months back, a mother had asked us to change the ophthalmologist, thinking that it is lack of his experience that makes him come back, dilate the eye every week and try to check, thinking that he was unable to complete his job. It's then we realize that unless we educate the parents the need for serial testing, they would not cooperate and would not come back. So please remember, the stakeholders in high-risk follow-up are the parents. Unless they're educated the need for follow-up, the need for testing, they could never participate and be compliant. This is probably the solution to what most people report as poor compliance and loss to follow-up in India. In our unit, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the parents of NICU are educated on a standard protocol on why we need to do eye examination and follow-up, hearing, development testing, basic parenting, vaccination, and so on. On the other alternate day, babies of normal babies' parents are taught routine care. So this has improved our follow-up rate, and the high-risk baby follow-up is close to 80 to 90%. Learning may not come only from developmental processes. One of the learning came from a very simple research project we wanted to do. My colleague consultant now, Dr. Jyoti, was doing fellowship with us, and her project was on trying to improve hand hygiene as one of the steps of a care bundle to reduce antibiotic use in the unit. It is then we realized that we had no process documented as to who will teach the nurses and doctors the steps of hand wash and who would audit them. And if there was no written protocol, how is it going to happen? So we first wrote down a protocol, then educated, documented that everyone was educated. We found that the hand wash rates with complete 5 moments, not movements, that is before touching patient, after touching patient, before touching the surroundings of patient and after, and so on, improved in doctors from 12% compliance to 50%, and in nurses from 30% to 80%. When we presented at a national conference, the chairperson actually advised us to first improve our hand hygiene processes, and that in their unit, the compliance is 100%. I smiled to myself and just realized that unless you start a journey of process improvement and lay down simple steps, you would not even know where you are lacking in your systems. Another learning example, which may have relevance to development and high-risk newborn, is we had preterm babies, GDM babies, and LGA babies screened for hypoglycemia in the rooms. On one day, we went to the room to realize that nurse had recorded a sugar of 30 and did not tell us, because we only told her to record blood sugar every 6 hours. It did not say that if the value is less than 40, she needs to call us. We need to act and then review. It is after that we started writing the instructions in 2 steps. Please check blood sugar. And second, if less than 40, call this number. And then there was a action plan outlined for the resident also, that they have to reach out in how much time and what they have to do. So sometimes having simple steps are very important. Documentation, communication, and complete sequences if you want quality to happen right. We all know that doing a new process comes with a cost. And the cost of quality should not increase. And this cost is not just money, it is manpower. If the same person has to work more or more people are involved, then the quality process is self-defeating. We realized that a large number of babies were coming to the follow-up clinic and it was clogging our unit. We were not having enough manpower to do all this. At the same time, many low-risk babies who were coming for follow-up found no benefit, and they were very upset that they are coming and gaining no purpose by coming back to us. So we decided to then stratify babies based on the risk of disability into the highest risk, moderate risk, and mild risk. And in a retrospective audit found that 88% of babies would fit into low risk and could go back to community. Their risk of disability was less than 4%. Whereas the high risk babies had a disability rate of 18% and they needed the kind of close follow-up that is recommended. This way, we could reduce the number of patients undergoing an emotionally traumatizing experience of testing their baby for potential disability each time. The follow-up was not left behind. The community pediatrician was advised to refer them if they had any doubt. The other high-risk babies continue to be in close follow-up, and the focus could be very complete. So while we do a process of quality improvement, we need to focus on less work and less manpower, less processes. That is also an improvement in quality process. We figured that babies used to go to a pediatric neurologist, a orthopedician, and come back. They used to be very disturbed because this pediatrician or orthopedician had not previously been a part of the journey, the stressful journey that this family had spent with us for months together. They did not have the same empathy and connect with the family. They would do what they were asked to do. They would examine a dislocated hip, or they would look at his seizures, or they would look at his fundus and give an opinion. But this opinion was not clearly communicated in terms of what has to be done when they have to come back, will the baby become better, and so on. And therefore, we decided to add certain columns in our follow-up chart, that every developmental testing had to have a column called interpretation. And the interpretation would state, today's assessment is normal. No further investigation or treatment is required based on today's assessment. At the same time, development is a continuous process and needs further follow-up. Many times parents ask, "Ab to normal hai, now it is good, so now I am not worrying." It's not that is over. If it said refer or retest, it meant that some of differences were not fitting in with normal, but not sufficient to get a referral. We would ask them to come for a retest. And if you picked up an abnormality, then there is no wait and watch. The timely referral is a very critical thing. And after we refer, our developmental therapist coordinator would first fix up an appointment so that the process of going to a specialist becomes easy. A family who is already suffering has to meet maybe many specialists. At least this part can be made easier for them. We may not be able to change permanently what damages are there. After the referral, the same specialist coordinator would then find out what is the interpretation of the findings, communicate in plain language to the family, and fix up further reviews so that it will be easy. So one of the requirements to make this process complete was a coordinator who in our case is a home science person trained as developmental therapist from CDC Kerala under Dr. M.K. Nair. And these people would then coordinate. They didn't have to be MBBS doctors or specialist neurologists. They would be coordinating all the specialists and making this process enjoyable and easy. Some of the simple basics often get forgotten. Despite having such a specialized unit, which was interested only in developmental outcome, it was difficult to implement in our own hospital, and often once in a week or once in 2 weeks, I was heard shouting in the unit at my residents for not filling up the growth charts and not plotting the head circumferences. I could not understand. I asked my teacher, Dr. Shabanath sir, why are these people not interested? They're sitting in a unit where somebody is interested in development. They don't plot the head circumference. I remind them again and again. Sir asked me, did you tell them clearly when and what they have to do? Please write down on a paper on which day of the week they have to do it and what they have to do with the value. So we wanted to learn this process clearly and improve this step. And we started having a checklist in the unit where they would document every Monday the head circumference of the babies and tell me if it was out of range. In this process of trying to learn developmental medicine, development supportive care, I attended a conference and a workshop in Italy. They were talking of a specialized incubator where they would record and play throughout the day the heartbeats and uterine souffle of the mother so that the baby's developmental outcome would be better. The baby would experience the same as he would do in utero. Science had already proven that Mozart's and Beethoven's playing in the unit are not going to improve developmental outcomes. So they felt the baby should hear what he would hear in utero. This device was going to cost 6 lakh rupees way back in 2006-7. I came back to India and I wondered what we can do. KMC was just getting into fashion, and we realized that if parents are involved from first day, their voice, when they do KMC, the heartbeat and the uterine souffle of the mother could be heard free of cost. So we have to learn that the process of improvement or quality should consider local resources and how to use that without adding new requirements from outside. Now our checklist was growing and becoming more purposive. Under my glass top in the NICU and the OPD, did we check for hypothyroidism? Did ROP screening happen on time? Did we schedule the next visit? Hearing screening, refraction, weekly head circumference, weight, and risk stratification, and so on. Even still, the compliance to the process was less than 20%. I'm being honest, till at least 5 years back. We then went one step further and evolved an algorithm which would be for new residents and nurses who joined the unit. And as soon as the baby was admitted, a book was placed under the baby's bed, which had a checklist based on the day of life. So on the first day, it said the resident and the nurse should involve the parents from first day. They should educate them on breast milk availability. They should record the risk factors present that day on the risk stratification chart. On the 3rd to 7th day, so besides doing blood gases, x-rays, and things like that, the residents would also and the nurses would also have to tick off based on the day, and we realized that our compliance rate went to 80 to 90%, not 100% even then. They would record a thyroid screening, a head circumference, again record the medical risk factors, talk about early stimulation to parents. They were told to talk to the baby. It was as explicit, as clear what they have to tell, and they would pay attention to the baby's position in the NICU. There is no point in talking of early position tool on the 10th day of life. The baby has spent a long time of his life in bad positions by that time. Unless this was there as a checklist, like you say, give antibiotic, do blood sugar monitoring, blood pressure. If it is written down, the nurses and doctors can do it. We had a clear plan for first 2 weeks, a neurosonogram, repeat head circumference, second thyroid screening, start supplements, and start non-nutritive suckling, oromotor stimulation, so on. Even with this kind of a checklist, we could never achieve 100% compliance. This is a confession. It is not often for me to pass a joke in the unit that the blue book of the baby still looks white, with none of these checklists being ticked off because everyone, including myself, forgot to look at it. All algorithms that are there work on a very basic principle. The supercomputers have only 2 words or 2 codes, 1 and 0. It's just that they use them very methodically and a little fast. And if many people work together, they form a supercomputer. So when many computers join together, speak the same language, ROP done? Yes, no. Date decided? Yes, no. Thyroid screening done? Yes, no. Thyroid screening repeat date given? Yes. So this kind of an algorithm had to be there in place where the answers were so simple and they were going to be shared as the same language by everyone in the unit. And this developed into what I shared today as a checklist model, what we call as the Blue Book. And then over the time, we audited the improvement in compliance processes and outcomes and found what is very obvious, that compliance increased in most processes from 30-40% to something like 80 to 90%. And the miss rates or potentially disability rates were definitely reduced. Very often, most of us are doing a lot of work in the unit, very busy trying to help improve processes. We must take a little time off to look around stop doing only neonatology, only pediatrics, and see whether getting a new system in place, a process in place, can make the same process more efficient. Would like to now just show you a glimpse of what I have been talking about ever for the last few 15-20 minutes. This is the Blue Book, and I'm going through a few pages of this Blue Book. It starts from birth and goes on till 6 years, and at 6 years, it has a language tool, a developmental tool, reporting from the teacher, behavior scale, social adaptation scale, refraction testing every year till 6 years, and even medical things like deworming. The risk stratification chart is there right from birth, weekly plotting of growth, weight, head circumference, and length. From day one, there is a checklist reminding what to do, and there's a pre-discharge checklist showing the family clearly and the resident and doctors are there any active medical problems pending, nutrition, medications, weight is tracking or not, just not the weight, OFC is tracking or not, physical examination completed, ROP screen scheduled, hearing test done, lab test complete, imaging done, neurological examination by Hammersmith tool done, immunization done and advised, early stimulation reminded, parent assessment done again on how they are adjusting to this problem and whether they have taken all the classes for pre-discharge preparation, so on. We also have pages on marking the neurological examination in the same book. Hearing assessment, you can see that there is a parent information here saying that both OE and BERA are important and that despite all this, they need to follow the language milestones. ROP screening chart so that ophthalmologist would mark on the same book and we would not go to the same accident that I showed you before. And 4 months assessment page is there, which says what all needs to be done. This 4 months goes on in a similar model at 8, 12, and then 18 months, 24 months, till 6 years of age. There's a medical examination page. Do not forget the babies have more organs than the brain. So oral thrush, squint, murmur, hepatosplenomegaly, these may be common problems in NICU babies and need to be checked. And the immunization book is incorporated into the same book so that wherever they go for immunization, this information will go with them. I only request that this Blue Book or a similar model may be adopted in the unit so that you may learn from our experiences, share with us the joy of trying to help families to have less misses. We may not be able to guarantee them that they would have a child with intact outcome. But what we can surely guarantee is that whatever signs of neurodevelopment is there, we are going to implement it and translate it in the baby's care without misses, without delay, and try and make sure that they get the best potential what is possible. Thank you for listening and sharing.